Hey there, we're live today in our interview series, and I'm so grateful that we are here with Don Petersen, attorney at law. And what's so exciting would be where he's come from. And he's going to share in more detail that from his humble beginnings of a 1.64 grade point, ended up at Harvard University, professor. He's a keynote speaker, and I believe that makes his story so very unique and applicable to all of us who have had those moments where we weren't exactly at the tippy top of our performance, and yet we could turn it all around. And meeting Don in my 7 a.m. networking meeting has been such a joy. He has quick wit. He has great taglines. He has ways for us to laugh in the morning where most of us are can admit that 7 a.m. meeting is pretty early, even though he gets up at 3:30, which you're going to hear a little bit more about, and his amazing systems and routines that he's created. I am so thankful to be here. And Don, I would love for you to share more about you so that who stumbles upon this, they can have more hope, more insight, whether it's them
Right.
themselves or it's that person that, if they're going to hand this off to their son, their daughter, someone who says, "Oh my gosh, I was not the straight A student," is there hope? So we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I certainly wasn't a straight A student until I got to college, but that was many years down the road. Um, I started out with, I guess, my parents were divorced when I was very young. My father was a full-blown alcoholic in and out of prison, jail, and whatnot. My mom was more a functional alcoholic, where she would have a giant bottle of Gallo wine on the kitchen table at night, and she would just drink, she poured in a glass first, but she was working so hard. She also worked an incredible amount. So she did that while drinking so much. Now the hardest thing, growing up, we had a small house. By today's standards, very small. It was like 1,000 square foot house. We had three bedrooms. For my mom was in one, my two sisters were in the other. I was in the third, which is basically a converted closet. And we had one bathroom for all of us.
Wow.
And so me, my mom, and two sisters, you could say me and the bushes became kind of friendly after a while, which was nice. You could do that. Um, so that's basically I didn't apply myself towards schooling until much later. I and I don't know if I forged my birth certificate. So I actually joined the union when I was 14. Um, and so I had a Detroit Free Press paper out, which people who might not remember that we had to finish delivering by 6. And then for a while it overlapped. I was working at Roma Hall in Livonia, which was a catering. They had a bunch of catering halls, and you typically work from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. And there was a union, so it was a good wage, particularly for a 14, 15-year-old kid. I was actually making more money than my mom was, who was, an adult working at a store in retail. So I didn't really care about my schooling. To me, schooling was just kind of an irritant. Now my 10th grade year, I lived alone, which I have a son now who's in the 10th grade, and I couldn't imagine him living alone because he can't hardly live with a family. I don't know how to live alone, but so you learn how to cook, you learn how to do laundry, you learn how to wash, because we didn't have washer or dryer, we had to go to the laundromat. So you learn how to wash clothes in the sink and hang them to dry, and all the little stuff that most kids, particularly in today's world, you don't worry about. But you're trying to survive every day, and so you're just doing what you have to do. That After my 10th grade year, which I think was maybe my biggest or my luckiest change, is we moved to Lansing. Now, my mom and my sisters had moved to Lansing during my 10th grade year. I stayed back because I thought I was going to play for the Detroit Tigers. So I was a baseball player. And I knew that the competition down in Livonia, where we were, was much better than up in Lansing. So I wanted to stay in Livonia to play baseball, which I did. Then the following summer is when I moved up to join my family. And that was a good move for me for numerous reasons. One, I was able to have a new group of friends, and two, I was able to kind of reinvent myself. So
Mm-hmm.
when you up and move, you can create a new image for yourself. So people don't know what your past was. And when I had, my old past image, I developed from kindergarten through 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you move to a new community, it's completely different. It's kind of like changing a new job.
Mm-hmm.
You can reestablish yourself. Now up in Lansing, I still didn't focus on school because I really didn't care about school. But I did end up being one of the best debaters in the state. The school I went to, we were lucky. We had a really good debate coach, and we were always one of the top teams in the state. And that's really what first got me moving towards law, was just that I enjoyed arguing, I enjoyed competing against other people, and I enjoyed winning. Um, and so I really think debate taught me a lot. Now, I still didn't apply that to my schooling. One of the other things that I think, so as you mentioned, I graduated high school just like a 1.64 grade point average. I was, because I didn't care about schooling at all. Um, but I was also working in a restaurant, and I was working a lot of hours. I became a restaurant manager at a young age. So I was working a lot of hours. And I decided that I didn't want, that wasn't the life I wanted, because I was working a lot of hours for not very much money. And at that point in my life, I was really driven by money. I wanted to work hard and make money. And that's very difficult in the restaurant world. Unless you start owning restaurants, you're definitely capped at how much you can make. So I wanted to do something different. I had a scholarship through the state of Michigan just based on my test scores. And I think it was the PSAT, that if I went to school, they would, and I forget the numbers exactly, but they would pay me X dollars a semester just if I went to school, college. And I went to the community college, and I made profit. I made like $500 each semester profit. So they would pay all my tuition, pay everything, and I'd still get an extra $500.
Wow.
Because they'd give me the same number no matter what state school I went to. So if
Mm-hmm.
I went to Michigan State or University of Michigan, which didn't let me in, um, I wouldn't get, I mean, it wouldn't be enough to cover the tuition. At the community college, it was. And the thing that I discovered at the community college was you can take whatever class you want. And so I still view to a large extent that the public school system is like subsidized babysitting, and they make, kids have to go there. But like I had to take classes like mini office machines, I had to take drafting, I had to take all these classes that were of no use to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just me being opinionated, but the same is true today. I mean, my daughter just graduated from high school. She took a full year of calculus. When is she ever going to use calculus? Now, I actually, because I went on to college, I used calculus a lot back in college, but since then I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I have to balance a checkbook, although now we have computers and calculators. So your basic curriculum in public schools is not really that important anymore. Um, I think English is important. I think reading and writing properly is very important. But I think most of the classes are just, it's kind of a waste of time. School is more of a maturation process. So when you go to school, you become more mature and you learn how to deal with other people. You learn your first bosses are your teachers. And so you have to interact with them in a certain way. And I think college is just a continuation of the maturation process. Um, because a lot of what you learn in college, you don't really use in the real world. And I was very lucky. I mean, I went to community college for a couple of years, and then I was able to transfer to University of Chicago. And that's, to me, this is I mean, funny story. Stop me if you like, but when I first, so I did really well on my, SATs and my test scores. And at the community college, I got all A's except for one class. And to me, this is funny, business law, which is not what I do. And I got a B in that, and I'll blame it on the teacher, but that's okay. Um, but anyway, so then when I applied to University of Chicago to transfer, they didn't let me in. And so and that was really where I wanted to go. That was like my dream school. And let me back up a little bit. I discovered University of Chicago when I was in the hospital because I was working like 70 hours a week at the restaurant, and I was going full time to Lansing Community College. So I would sleep every other night. So I would stay up for, like 44 hours. I would sleep for 4 hours, stay up for another 44 hours. I mean, I was always up 2 days in a row, sleep a little bit. Finally, I collapsed at work from exhaustion, ended up in the hospital. One of the regular customers at the Landmark restaurant up in front of the Lansing Mall, his name was Burdett. His real name was Harry, but his last name was Bottoms, so he went by Burdett, which was his middle name. But anyways,
Okay.
he brought me, I'll never forget, he brought me a Yankee magazine, was out when I was in the hospital. And there was an article in there about University of Chicago, and I read about it. I just fell in love. It was like a great book school, and their whole theory was why study Adams, or why read something that somebody else wrote about Adam Smith when you can just read Adam Smith. And
Hmm.
it made a lot of sense to me. So I went to Chicago, as I said, they didn't let me in. And then I drove there one morning. I got there right when the Dean of Admissions office was open. I got there like 9 a.m. Chicago time, which was 10 o'clock our time. I remember they went through three different students rotated who were working at the reception desk. And he he didn't, I mean, he didn't see me, but then as he was walking out of the office, I was still there. And his name was Ted O'Neill, he was Dean of Admissions. And I said, Dean, let me just talk to you for a minute. Boom. And so then we went back in his office. And it was weird because that was before computers, and he had these big huge file cabinets. And so what in hindsight has really impressed me, as soon as I told him my name, he was able to turn around, open a drawer, and pull out a manila folder with my record in it, which I did. I mean, that really impressed me at the time. And so I just begged him. I said, you can let me on a probationary status. He said, well, we don't do that. Anyway, so I begged him, and I guess I must have convinced him because I left the meeting and he said, I'll tell you what, do one more quarter at the community college, send us your grades, and we'll resubmit your application. I said, okay, well, that's great. And so he did, and I got in. And I still remember the letter coming in the mailbox when I got in. And it's just it was like a one-page letter, which I still have. My mom saved it for me. And so that was the biggest positive change in my life. Because once you do well at a school like the University of Chicago, you can do whatever you want. I mean, when I went there, it was like a small class. My graduating class was, I think, 600 or 700 people. Is that right? Or maybe no less. I don't know, whatever. It was very small. And I did well. I was lucky. I did well. And so then I could pretty much, I applied to the top 10 law schools in the country, except for Yale, because our pre-law advisor at Chicago said Yale doesn't like University of Chicago people. You should apply to the rest. So I applied to the other 9, and Michigan was my safety school. And because I was from Michigan, and I got into all of them, and I picked Harvard. And so that, when I still remember when I got the acceptance from Harvard. I think it was the second school I heard from, and it came in a big manila folder. And I remember I was in the elevator at the dorm. We're only a 3-story dormitory. And I was in the elevator with a student named Betsy Thielman, who I haven't talked to, since I graduated, but I still remember her name. That's how momentous an occasion it was. So I got in, and I was just, I mean, I was happy, of course. But I'll never forget, I called my best friend, and he was still working at the restaurant. And I said, Terry, you'll never believe it, I just got into Harvard Law School. And his response was, is that some kind of graduate school? So he's like, he had no idea. And that just shows, my friends back home, my friends weren't academic at all. They were, it was Lansing. I didn't, and I went to a horrible school, a high school now get, ranked D by the state in their school rankings. And, it's just, and they didn't do a good job of motivating students. I didn't do a good job of letting myself be motivated until I got to community college. And then I went to University of Chicago. And I mean, I love University of Chicago till to today. I still, I mean, I love it a lot more than any other school I've been to. But it was insanely competitive. And I'll never forget one of my first two early experiences at University of Chicago. I was in astrophysics. Um, and it was the biggest class I ever had. Chicago was like, I think over 40 students, where they're known for having small class sizes. And Professor Schramm was talking so fast. And I didn't, I mean, I felt really overwhelmed just being at the school because I didn't fit in. And so I looked over, I was sitting next to a girl, and I looked at her because I just wanted to copy her notes because I couldn't as fast. And as soon as I looked over, as soon as she saw me, she covered her paper. She wouldn't let me. It's just notes. And so I said, well, I know what kind of place I'm at now. It's, like I said, insanely competitive. And maybe now this is me. This is how I drive myself. Is two of it was a quarter system, so you had 3 quarters in the school year, and 2 of the 3 quarters I had the highest grade in the class. So I knew I had better than her. So that made me feel
That's good.
good. But that's how I drive myself. When I feel slighted, I want to work harder to try and achieve what I want to achieve. Um, and Chicago is just a wonderful environment for that because it rewards your hard work. And it's very difficult, but if you work hard, you can do fine. But there's other, it's not all. What do you say? It's not all happy times there. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. But if you succeed there, you can succeed anywhere. So I feel like I'm rambling on. Well, then, so from Chicago, I applied to the top, 9 of the top 10 law schools in the country. I got into Harvard. Then I went to Harvard. Um, Now, by the time I graduated Chicago, by the time I got to Harvard, I was pretty cocky. So, like I say, when I first went to Chicago, I didn't feel like I belonged at all. Because I mean, all these people from private high schools and wealthy people, and that wasn't me. One of the things that's always driven me, and particularly at that time too, was how poor we were. I didn't have any money. I couldn't do things with other students. I couldn't afford to. Um, so then by the time I got to Harvard, still didn't have money, but I felt that I had been academically prepared and that I could do anything that anybody at Harvard could do because I had proven myself at Chicago, University of Chicago. So I got there and the economics department was looking for somebody to teach economics. And so I went and Larry Lindsay interviewed me. Larry Lindsay, who went on to become the first President Bush's chief economic advisor, and then he was on the Federal Reserve Board.
Mhm.
And anyway, he's the one who hired me to teach. And so I'll never forget. He like had me like die. So I got to back up again. My honors paper at Chicago was a paper about the professional baseball players' labor market, and it got
Mm.
some underground circulation. He had seen it, which I think was one of the reasons why he hired me. But for whatever reason, I didn't have any graphs or anything. And if you ever study economics, graphs are a major part. I don't know why I didn't have graphs in hindsight. So in the middle of the interview, he said, "Well, get up and graph," and he had me graph a bunch of stuff. So that was like part of his interview was how I could graph things. I'll never forget that. And then I didn't get the job, at the end of the interview, but then I eventually got the job. And so I taught, and that was a great. And then I later found out they were kind of looking for what I call a token Chicago guy. Chicago is very well known as a school of economics, and it's won by far the most Nobel Prizes in economics. That's where Milton Friedman and a bunch of really famous economists went and taught. And so anyway, so maybe I was just a token Chicago guy. But that's okay. I liked it, so I really enjoyed teaching. And then while I was teaching that, I was able to teach in what they call the international tax program at the law school. Um, and that was with people typically from the students were from third world countries, and they liked me because I could speak English, because I could teach.
Hmm.
And so in that, so I was teaching in the law school and I was teaching in the college. So naturally my grades slipped a little bit. I mean, I still graduated cum laude or something, but not well, before my third year of law school, I was at summa cum laude. And then the third year, I was teaching like three full-time professors typically teach two classes a semester. Well, I was teaching three and I was a full-time student. And it was like, so it definitely ate into some of my study time. But I would never give it up because teaching is a great experience and I continue to teach today. Um, so that, I mean, that's with law school and getting through law school. Well, then you have to get out in the real world. And are you going to succeed? What's going to happen? And at that time in my life, I was motivated solely by money. All I cared about was trying to make as much money as I could because I never had money.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's an odd feeling when you grow up on welfare and food stamps, and all of a sudden, your first year out of Harvard Law School, they're paying you like $80,000 a year, which was a lot of money back then.
Right.
Plus
Yeah.
yearly bonus. I think my first year I got, I don't know, 50,000 or something just in a lump sum check that just was my bonus.
Hmm.
And so, you like the money. And so but I only I stayed at that really high paying job for a couple of years. And then I left and came back to Detroit where my dad was. My dad by that point had become remarried and he kind of turned his life around. Still drank too much. He is what he is, but he never went back to jail. So I mean, which doesn't sound like much, but
It was
if you knew his
progress.
background, that means a lot. And he really, and by the time I got out of, I'm trying to think now, by the time I got out of law school, he would have been what, 50, I don't know, 55 or 59 or something. So by that point on, he still drank too much, but he wasn't getting in trouble. He had found a woman. So his second wife was a little bitty thing, but if he stepped out of line, she would kick his butt. I mean, she couldn't physically do it, but all she had, but she would look at him and she would use that tone of voice that would put him in his place. That's what he always needed. I wonder what would have happened if he would have met her, 30 years earlier.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have been here, but his life would have turned out. My father to this day is the smartest person I've ever met. And
Hmm.
I've met some really smart people. I'm going to the schools I went to, teaching at Harvard, and you meet some really smart people.
Hmm.
So, as I said, I was really driven by money at that point. That's all I cared about, um, I guess. But then I went back to Detroit, and I accepted less money, but because I wanted to be near my dad and his wife. By this point, the rest of my little sister had moved to the Boston area. My older sister, my mom was living with my older sister down in North Carolina because my mom had MS.
Hmm.
And so she was basically bedridden by then.
Oh gosh.
Um, so that, and so when I moved to Detroit, shortly thereafter, my sister moved to outside of Chicago to Crystal Lake, Illinois, and so I would go visit every month, um, which, um, just because I wanted to and because she's my mom, and
Hmm.
I got to see my sister at the same time. Um, well, I've kind of forgotten where I was. Okay, well then I worked for the other firm in Detroit for a couple of years, and then I decided to start my own firm. So myself and another fellow who I was working with, we started our own firm. And like I say, we had no clients, we had nothing but in the old days, like solitaire, you could play solitaire on a computer. I don't know if you've ever, okay, well, in the old days, that was all there was on a computer was solitaire. There weren't all these fancy games like now. And so I became a very good solitaire player as we sat there in the office waiting, praying that a client would come through the door. Um, but then I was able to start teaching economics at Oakland University.
Mm.
And so that so I was a litigation attorney before then. All I did was trial work. And then I started teaching economics and I found that I could market myself better as a business lawyer.
Mm,
because people seem to think that, well, if you know economics, you must know business.
mhm,
So that's how I could market myself. So eventually I did probably 90% business law and 10% litigation.
mm,
Um, and I did that. And I did that for, I don't know, was it 7 years, 8 years, something like that, a little while. Um, but that was my work life, and my work life was going very well, I thought. But I wasn't very happy with my personal life. It was basically everything had to do with work. And I worked a lot of hours because when you're working for yourself, you do that.
mhm.
And when I wasn't doing real work, I was out socializing. I was trying to get new clients. And it was successful. So that, I said I left a couple of years later but we had like, I don't know, 7 lawyers, Steve and we had like 7 lawyers working for us. And so we had gotten the clients and we had built it up, and I'd been very fortunate in that way. But I was unhappy with my personal life.
Mhm.
Um, so that throughout that time, certainly at the beginning, I was driven by money. And I made unbelievable amounts of money. I mean, I would fly to London for the weekend to see a concert or something, just stupid stuff. I would get a new fan. I would always have like a two-seater convertible and a fancy SUV, a Range Rover or something. And I would change every couple of years. I mean, I was just, if you want a lesson in excess or how you can waste money, I'm the guy. I can teach about wasting money. I mean, at the same time, my life was not happy. Um, and all I really wanted, okay, I had done a thing with the money. I went, and it was weird because when I was younger, I was not, women, they didn't like me, whatever. I was too busy working. I was focused on success. Well, then I found that when I started making a lot of money and I started driving fancy cars, it's amazing how women start to like you. It's like, oh, I changed. I'm a different person now. No, I had money,
Mhm.
But it truly is the same. But what I discovered was that the women who were, and it was literally throwing themselves at me. There was only a particular type of woman, and one that I wasn't really interested in. I mean, they might be fine for a short period of time, but you kind of recycle them and go through the next. Um, until I finally, but it was actually before. So before I met my wife, and now we've been married well over 20 years. Um, I knew that I wanted to change. I wanted things to change. And so I had a Cadillac Escalade EXT, which is like a big Cadillac pickup truck.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I got rid of it. I only had it for a couple of years. I got rid of it, and I got a Volkswagen Touareg, so very not a flashy car at all. And I had a Mercedes, like a CLK convertible, again, a two-seater convertible. Okay, well, I got rid of it. I got a Honda S2000. Okay, still a two-seater convertible and still a nice SUV, but not nearly as flashy as what I had. And so I was slow but sure steps to, I guess, moderation or humbleness
You're
or,
changing your identity.
yeah, yeah, I was. And the other thing I'm thankful for, although I went out a lot still with clients and whatnot, um, I wasn't drunk all the time. I mean, it's not, I've never smoked marijuana. I've never had an interest in smoking marijuana. I had a lot of friends, close friends, who smoked a lot of marijuana. And that didn't bother me at all because I thought that made me look better in comparison. So I was happy if somebody else was smoking a lot of marijuana or getting drunk because I wasn't.
Mhm.
And people would notice those things. And that, I think, it helped. I mean, I'm convinced that helped me to be a success and to build the firm. Um, so then the firm we got pretty big, and then I met my current wife, and we got married, and I decided that I didn't want the firm anymore because I thought it was an unhealthy life. Number one, it was an unhealthy lifestyle. Number two, I wanted a family. And so I just walked away from the firm. I didn't get a buy. I got nothing. I just walked away from everything. and I became a full-time professor at Cooley Law School in Grand Rapids. The year before I had become a part-time, I guess, adjunct professor at Cooley in Lansing. But then they said, well, why don't, you're interested, we're opening a new campus in Grand Rapids. Would you like to teach there, full time? And I said, sure. So I went through the interview process and they hired me, and I was one of the, first professors in Grand Rapids for Cooley. And so that's a completely different lifestyle. So I went from making, um, I went, when I was a lawyer, I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Now, of course, I was spending that much, but I was making it, and I saved what I could. And then when I went to become a full-time law professor, I didn't have tenure then. I think my salary was something, was it, I don't know, I think 67 or 87, something like that. It was under 100 grand. And so now I had money in the bank, but it was a substantial reduction in pay. So um, you had to do things like I didn't feel like I could afford to join a gym, so I started running. And I didn't, and it's you change your life when you don't have all that gross amounts of money floating around, and you live differently. You don't take the same vacations. You don't fly to London for the weekend. You just don't do things like that. And oddly enough, I found my life was much better.
Mm,
I enjoyed it. So then I had my daughter, she's a fresh woman in college at Grand Valley. And I have a son who's in 10th grade at Milford High School. I have another son who's in 7th grade at White Lake Middle School. And, I've rededicated. So what I used to dedicate to my job, I try to dedicate to my family. And you know what? I don't make nearly as much money. I mean, it's not even comparable. And I worry about money. So sometimes I have, and so when you're making that much money, you don't worry about it. You get something you spend, you spend it because you can never spend that much. Well, now there's time where I worry about it, where I don't, now I buy a car just every 5 years or whatever. It's not, I don't buy it and trade them in and lose a ton of money on a new one. And so you live differently, but I found that my life is much better than it used to be because I can look in the mirror and I can be happy with myself.
mhm,
Now I'm always trying to, as you talked about how we met, I'm always trying to get clients. I'm always trying to build up the business. But so like this morning, we had to delay meeting today because it was my son's birthday party. And
mhm,
so I had to and it's a long story. My other son smashed our other car. So we needed two cars to take people they were going to Zap Zone.
mhm,
Okay, well, so that's what I did this morning. I spent an hour and a half taking them to Zap Zone and back. Now they're still now I have to go pick them up in the afternoon. But if I were, working for a firm making a good salary, there's no way I would take off in the middle of the morning. You
mhm,
just don't do that thing because you owe an obligation to your boss. The way my life is organized now, I'm more than happy to do that because that's why I'm not making, all the money. That's why
mhm,
I'm making enough to pay the bills, house over the head, et cetera. But we're not going to Hawaii every year or something. And I'm still far happier. And just when I see my kids, I'm happy. So it's odd. To me, it's odd. I would say I'm very close to my oldest daughter. In fact, we texted this morning. She's a finalist to become a new drum major for Grand Valley. She's a band geek,
yay.
and so we'll see. She was drum major at Lakeland High School, and so she tried out for Grand Valley, and that's good. Now my oldest son, the one who smashed the car, he's only 15. He's a basketball player. I would say we're not very close. We're not as close as I would like to be. Um, but I mean, I'm comfortable that I've tried, and just
Mhm,
for whatever reason, I haven't succeeded with him yet. But my younger son, who's in 7th grade, whose birthday it is, we're close. I mean,
mhm.
so it's just the middle son I got to work on. And I'm not sure, but he's cooler than I ever was. Yeah.
Aw,
Um, but
that's,
it's just a question of, setting your goals and then trying to achieve them. And, so when I look at this whole life, it's and if you listen to my story, a lot of it is how do you define success? How do you define it, and what steps do you take to achieve it? And something I've always believed is, I would say tunnel vision to success. So when you decide what success is, so success making a lot of money, to some people is when I was younger, that's what success was. Is success having a good family? Is success somewhere in between? I mean, what is success? And it's important that you be brutally honest with yourself.
Mhm.
So that, I mean, and in the earlier stages of my life, I was worried about making money. And that was it. And I drove myself to make as much money as possible. That's no longer my driving force. Now I try and make money to put a, to support my family. But I mean, I don't want to take them to Hawaii every year. But, there's other things I'd rather do.
Mhm.
Um, I'm more, I don't know if concern's the right word, but I want them to enjoy life, to enjoy school, and to go on and be the best person they can. It's like my daughter, she's insanely smart. But like, for example, she didn't go to IA, which is in the basement of Lakeland, and it's a wonderful school. It's arguably the best school in Michigan. And if you live for sure in the Lakeland area, you get preferential entrance, right? They'll let you in. And until that day, I thought she was going to go there, but she didn't. So that bummed me out. But then she went to Lakeland, and then, which is actually in the same building, but she became a band geek. And all she cared about, well, basically became a band geek, and she became a drum major and all this stuff. And that's what she cared about. She still graduated in the top 10 of her class. And she was the only member of the band who did that. So she's very proud of that. And then she went on and she didn't apply to Chicago. She didn't apply to Harvard, which, I really wanted her to, but I don't force her to do anything. I want her to do what would make her happy. She ended up at Grand Valley and she's happy there. And that gives me a lot of comfort for now that I'm, working, when I'm being a lawyer, I'm practicing law. I don't have to worry about her. I mean, because I know that she's fully capable of, living on her own and being mature. I
Mhm.
say my next son, I may have to worry about a little bit, but not Raina. Raina, my daughter, she's fine. And that, gives me a lot of peace too, because I know I don't have to worry about it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. And before we hit the record, we were talking about your routine and how you've made your routine. And it was such a great question because I think how were we talking? We were talking about like bedtime, and you said yours is around 8:30, and I was like, it's got to be because you get up early.
Yeah.
So tell us about your routine.
Yeah, I generally go upstairs and go to bed around 8:30. But if I go upstairs at 8:30, then I have to get ready for bed, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll read a little bit in bed. So usually by 9:30 or quarter after 9, I'm ready to fall asleep. I get up at 3:30 every morning and I go to Planet Fitness, which is open 24 hours, and I exercise. And that I remember when I started exercising was that when I interviewed at Oakland University to teach economics there. I was, I think, 30 years old. And I don't know what they have now, although I teach at Oakland University again, but it's Zoom. But I had to climb like 3 or 4 flights of stairs to get to Professor Tracy's office, who was the head of the economics department. And I remember walking in his office, I was out of breath. I mean, I literally couldn't talk. I was gasping for air. And that's when I made up my mind. I got to get back in shape. I have to go to the gym. Because when I was younger, I mean, I played sports like all boys do. And so I was in pretty good shape until I went to college and law school. And then when I was working for the big fancy firm in Chicago, we ate out at least 2 meals a day. You'd order them in the office. And so
Hmm.
I was eating unhealthy. I was not exercising, etc. And it devolved to the point where, as I said, when I was going to OU, just climbing, I don't know, 3 flights of stairs, where I was out of breath. And I couldn't really talk. And so that's when I made up my mind I have to get in shape. And ever since then, I've been exercising, I go to the gym probably 5 days a week or something.
It's part of your
It's,
routine.
yeah, right. That's my routine.
Mhm.
I interrupt like when I had health issues. Um, when I was, I had, I don't know what all you care. I had brain surgery a couple times. I had,
A couple of times?
yeah, two brain surgeries. Yeah,
What? You left
I
that
never,
out. Hold on. Hold on
I
a
never,
second. You left that out. What?
yeah,
What?
I had two brain surgeries. It's when I was a professor, and I was and I had trouble with motor operation. I was having trouble driving. I was like veer over to the wrong lane, and just climbing stairs up and down stairs were problematic. So I fell a couple times, and so finally I convinced my doctor to he sent me for a head MRI, and I went from the head MRI, and they literally the head MRI. Now I've had a bunch of MRIs. It normally takes 45 minutes. Well, after about 20 minutes, he shut it down and I got shipped to emergency and I needed brain surgery. And so then and I don't know, a couple hours later is when the surgery was. But that's actually one of the most, so I remember lying in the gurney outside the operating room, and it's just me being me, but I'm trying to flirt with the nurses, blah, 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 be friendly, have everybody laugh. And they were not in a laughing mood. So they were taking it very serious. So it started making me recognize that there must be something serious. Now, after the fact, I checked, I only had an 18% survival rate. So, I was supposed to die, but I didn't. Because I,
Twice?
well, no, the second one was much not nearly as. So I'm lying on the gurney, and I think that I think this is very, and I changed at that very moment. I mean, I became a professor, and I became less type A than I was, but I wanted to be the best professor there was. I mean, that's always been my goal. I want to be the best at everything I do. Well, I'm lying on the gurney before they wheel me in, and I had my daughter was alive then, but not my son, and so I was basically praying for her, what would happen to her. And then I finally made up my mind that all you can do is the best you can do. That's all you can do. And if your best isn't good enough, it's not your fault. It's God's fault or some higher power's fault that you weren't made smarter or a harder worker or whatever. And so ever since that moment, I've felt comfortable just knowing that all I can do is the best I can do. Now, my ego tells me that my best is pretty good, but it's not perfect, obviously. And so, but I never get, if I know I'm doing my best, if I fail at something, it used to crush me, but it doesn't crush me anymore.
Mhm.
And so it changed the way I think about myself and the way I think about life. And everybody's got to think that. And all you can do is just do your best. And if your best isn't good enough, that's all you can do.
Mhm.
And that it seems like such a simple concept, but it's so hard for most people to grasp. I mean, I didn't grasp it until I'm lying outside of surgery room or
Mhm.
going in for brain surgery. And then after that, I don't know, I rushed back to work too soon. And then I had a seizure in the office, and I don't remember much, but I got taken to the hospital by ambulance. And then I had a second brain surgery. But it was like subdural hematoma stuff. So it wasn't cancer, thank you. And the second one was much less risky than the first one because the condition wasn't nearly as poor.
Mhm.
So, I did that. But then I had my year follow up after my brain surgeries, they discovered I had MS. And the
Mhm.
way they diagnose you with MS is they run a head MRI, brain MRI. And if you have what they call lesions, basically it looks like a fist. And it's called Dawson's fingers. And I don't know if you're familiar with MS, but that's what my mom had. But it's far more common in women than men. And it's usually younger. It's usually like women who are between 30 and 35 are typically diagnosed with it. But nobody really knows what MS is. They haven't done nearly enough research on it. That's what I say. It's not really a glory disease. It's not like AIDS where you get a lot of press, a lot of newspaper stuff. So, now thankfully, since my mom had it, they've come out with medicine. And so now I used to have to give myself a shot every other day. I did that for 10 years or 13 years or something. And now I just go and I have infusion. So twice a year, I just sit there hooked up to an IV all day and it just drips the drug in me. And
Mm,
that could be worse. You just sit there and other than when they jab the needle in you, I'm afraid of needles. It's not painful. It's not, you just sit there.
mm,
Um, so that was that. And then I don't know if we're going through my medical history, then just about a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. Um, I have tongue cancer. And so so over the last year, I did a lot of fighting that. I had surgery down at Carmano's Cancer Center. I had a lot of radiation treatment. And it's really the radiation treatment that kicks your butt because you're out of it and you can't, like, I couldn't eat solid food for like 2 months. Which helped me lose weight, but you got to look on the bright side of things.
mhm,
But I'm just starting to, I'm trying to gain some weight back. I mean, I don't want to gain all the weight back, but like to gain a little bit. um, but so now, so like you, so I drink fluids all the time. I drink water. I have a mug of water right next to me because I don't have the saliva glands on the left side of my mouth anymore. So
mm,
I can't spit, you know.
mhm,
So I need to drink a lot of water to keep the fluids going. And so far, so good. So I finished radiation. I remember August 20th.
mm,
So since August 20th, I've been radiation free. So that's what, about 6 months. So that's
mm.
half a year. Um, and I'm hopeful. And so every month it gets a little better. I'm hopeful, a year from now or 6 months from now, I won't even, can I drink water? As soon as I start talking about it, I have to have some.
Mhm.
But I think I'm going to continue getting better. And my doctor said that you really won't know for 5 years whether you're cured,
Mm.
um, which means you're not going to remediate and that's not going to pop up again. But right now, things are looking good. So
Good.
those
Good.
are that's my health story.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, the
But
amount of endurance and perseverance is even more than I imagined because we didn't get into the depth of this when we did our one-on-one. And I know that that will inspire someone else, especially when you chose to share the depth of your health and how on the bed you decided. And I think that so many times people take for granted the decision that gets made. Somebody gives you a diagnosis, they give you something, and then you're supposed to take it. And you said, I'm going to take this and you
no, yeah,
added to that. And I want this, and I'm going to do this.
I'm not ready to give up.
Good.
I,
And
I,
that's what's it shows in all the things that you came from. I mean, right from your grade point. You know what I mean? You
yeah,
pivoted.
you just have to. It's a question of, what I call tunnel vision. You have to. I set myself goals, and your goals can change throughout your life. And I find that a lot of people, particularly when they're younger, they're not honest with themselves.
Mm,
Um, and so they could set, so like me, I wanted the most money I could make. And that was my goal. Well,
mm,
that's not a healthy goal. And it's not, at least for me, it wasn't a way I wanted to live long term. I was far more happy with a family. So I wanted to raise a family and have a family as I do now. So now I could get, I mean, for better or worse, my resume looks pretty good. I could get a far more high paying job, no question, but I would have to work a lot of hours and I wouldn't have the flexibility to see all my son's basketball games or see all my daughter's, even now she does, her percussion recitals or whatever. All my youngest son's baseball games, and now he's getting into band like my daughter did. So now I can do that because I worked for myself.
mhm.
And I'm willing to give up a certain amount of money for that freedom to be with my family. And I think some of it stems from my family because my dad was never around, and my mom, she was always working, and so my parents were never around for me. And, and so I want to be there for my children and my wife. Um, she had a more normal upbringing. She grew up in Novi in a nice, subdivision house, and her parents were there. And I don't think her mom ever worked, and so her mom was a stay-at-home mom. My wife's a stay-at-home mom, and that's something that's really good for the children. And I just feel that when you bring children into the world, you owe it to them and to society in general to be there for them.
Mhm.
Um, because something that I firmly believe behind every bad kid's a bad parent.
I think we talked
Um,
about that a little bit.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so
you see
you,
it in sports, you see it in activities, and when they say the apple doesn't fall far
yeah.
from the tree, well, there's truth to
Well,
it.
and in a lot of children's sports, you see kind of, I don't know about overbearing parents, but parents will they'll sit back in the stands, they'll curse, and they'll,
Hmm.
and you know where the kid gets it from.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
just they're just mirroring their parent.
Yeah, that
Um,
example for sure.
and it doesn't make them a better athlete.
No, it does not. And it usually ends up being a parent cut. Oh.
Well, I mean, well, it brings to mind a couple stories. So when I was real young and I was a good baseball player, I played for the same coach, I think 3 years in a row. But he had a rule. This is when I was young, before high school. And he had a rule that for parents, okay, if a parent said anything negative to the umpire or somebody on the other team, um, then their kid was benched. And
Consequences.
maybe one or two games, the parents would be that way, but they quickly changed.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
because
that
the
that
consequence was a
yeah,
direct to their child and their playing time. It's beautiful. And I
yeah,
think that so many times today, there's such a worry of how it's going to be received or someone feels. And it's like, wait a second, we're missing the structure of why the disrespect is not acceptable. And
yeah.
then it becomes this, like, then the
Well,
child ends up with it.
that's what we talked about a few minutes ago. Behind every bad child's a bad parent. And so because they start to mirror your conduct.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, and so it's important that I think we be positive role models for our kids. So like for me, I mean, I know, so my son was on the JV basketball team for Milford High School this year. And I'm a dad, right? I always think he should play more and do this. And the coach, what are you doing? I keep my mouth shut. I can think whatever I want to think, but I don't say a word. Maybe when I get home, I'll say something to my wife, and but I don't say anything from the stands, and I don't say anything to my son,
Hmm.
um, other than hustle, hustle.
Right, right. Effort,
But
effort, compete, compete.
yeah, but I would never speak poorly about the coach to my son. I mean, that would be, I think, completely inappropriate. And I don't know anything about I don't know a good coach from a bad coach. I know that my son's not playing as much as I wish he would.
Hmm.
And so
Right.
I don't know why, I don't know how. I just sit there and watch.
Hmm. Well, being it's such a privilege to watch and observe, and yet being the competitive person that you are, it would only be
Yeah,
natural that you would love for him to play more. So,
yeah,
yeah, being there is your first purpose and focus, and you've done it, and you've served all of us. I know in our networking group how many people you've already supported in a variety of ways, and what a gift that is, and that ripple effect, and being able to speak and give inspiration from your own story because I mean, I know that this will teach and inspire so many people in general at a variety of ages and places to inspire them to say, you still can go show up at someone's office and say, I'd like to
yeah,
be here. I want the possibility. Now, would they go turn around to a file cabinet? Probably not. They'd go to their computer, but the difference is initiating that desire and showing up for it is what you did in that guy's office. And he specifically said, okay, do this. You did it and you showed up and here
Mm,
you are. And that's the difference is that so many times I think we miss out on the ask, which is part of our meeting. What's your ask
yeah,
this week? What do you need? What do you desire? What do you want? And you can't support someone's dream come true. You can't support someone's ask unless it's out there. And you
right.
did it. So I love it and I'm grateful. I know when I met with you, I was like, what? What? And there's more. And then there's more. And then you didn't even tell me about your two brain surgeries. Oh my
No,
goodness. My goodness. So I know you will be inspiring to many, and your wife and your three children are very, very fortunate that you chosen and you didn't become a statistic just because you were in, you know what I mean? Like you didn't choose that same route. You
no.
chose something completely different. And like you said, because you didn't have them there, now you're there. So I think people miss out on the truest blessings of what they think that happened to them, which really was for them. And that really, I can't wait till you write your book
I
because
know
that part.
I've been writing it. I need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's so inspiring to recognize like so much hope there, yet you had to be responsible. You couldn't change the past. There wasn't anything that you could have done different with your parents, for your parents at that
And
time. They were doing the best they could.
I wouldn't want to change the past. The past is what made me who I am and what I am. And there's everybody, like I always say, you can learn good and bad from everybody. You learn bad. You don't want to, I don't want to be an alcoholic. I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be unrealized potential
Hmm.
because, like I said, he's the smartest man I ever made, but he never went to college. I mean, um, he was great at Trivial Pursuit, but that's and I just want to take when you meet people, you want to take the good from them.
Hmm.
And everybody is just an accumulation of the various personalities they've met throughout life.
Hmm.
And, probably more their parents than anybody else. But as you have parents, as you have close friends, you try and learn from them what you can, because you can learn more from a person than reading a book.
Hmm.
Find people you respect or you admire and see how they've achieved what they've achieved, and then try and mimic what they've done. And it's not going to be exactly the same, but if you can show that, well, Bob always works really hard. He's good to his but whatever, then you can do the same thing. You can work hard. You can be good to your boss. Or if you're trying to raise money, there's certain ways, you behave differently if you're trying to raise money from people than if you're trying to, you know, convince the city or the municipality of a zoning change or
Hmm.
and I've had to do that a lot in my career. You get to hopefully if you work in the same city, you get to know the city officials and you find out what they're like, what makes them tick,
Hmm.
and that ultimately helps yourself or helps your client.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
communication and connection makes a difference.
Yeah.
Well, I
I
can
like that.
see where you've pivoted multiple times in your life and chosen into a new identity, and that recreation is beautiful and something that your kids can definitely admire.
I'll disagree on one point. I don't think it's a new identity. I think it's a new focus. I think that my entire life I've been the same person. I just manifested it differently. So I
Mm,
think I've always been a caring person. I've always wanted what's best for the society, for the world, but I just expressed it. I found new ways to express it, but I
mhm,
always had the same core principles. I just didn't always express them well. So I became better at expressing them, I think. I don't know. That's
no, it's beautiful. And the difference of what you said, you surrendered to on the hospital bed. You surrendered
Oh
to
yeah, yeah. That was huge. That's another moment I will never forget.
yeah, those are
Um,
experiences not to be forgotten that takes you in a, and I guess that's where I say in the new identity, like you were choosing to identify differently instead
true.
of like, you
Yeah.
weren't identifying as Donnie. You're still
Right.
Don, yet you were
Yeah.
identifying this no longer works. I'm going to do this instead,
Right,
which you said you manifested and you were clear
right,
about that. So I think that's a really good point because I think sometimes people, when they're identifying as good or bad, it's a matter of the distinction of what you want.
right,
Like this is no longer acceptable. I'm not going, like you said, you chose not to drink because you saw what that looked like. You are identifying with what was not
right,
acceptable, and then you chose something that you did accept
right.
and with great reason. And some people might never know that reason of the depth of it, and that's what makes it so purpose-filled.
I don't go around preaching to people. I don't really tell my story. Like I said, we had one. I probably didn't mention most of this to you then. Um, but it's what I am. It's what made me
Mhm.
what I am. And I'd like to think that I'm a positive member of the community because I think I care about the right things. And it's not a question of I hate when it's not a question of Republican or Democrat. It's a question of a person.
Oh, 100%.
Are you a caring person or not a caring person?
Yep.
I don't think it's not more of this party or that party is more. And it just really bugs me when I hear all this political people getting at each other for political reasons. But
I
that's another
agree.
hour conversation, so I won't go there.
No, I agree. I think that that's where we get to know people, and that's part of our program. And being able to meet one on one is getting to know the person, so then we can understand what they do, how they do it, and when they do it, so that we can either collaborate, we can partner, and we can refer. So that's the truest value. And then when some of those other things get involved, then there's less control because it's not something necessarily that fits in our file cabinet. It's
Right.
not our file cabinet. It's not like it's not mine. I'm not in politics and neither are you. So it's
Right.
not part of our file cabinet. So we get to, discuss many other things, health. The wealth in what we create is not always in the physical. The wealth is in the relationships. It's in how we choose our
Oh,
time, the example that you're setting by choosing in early at night so that you can get up early and then you have less commotion at the gym. I'm sure it's of like peace and
oh
joy.
yeah.
See the sun come up. There's lots of things that I think get missed because there's other focused. And yeah, we don't need to focus on that because I don't know about you. I can't control it. I don't know if you can
Well,
control it.
all we can do is the best we can do.
Absolutely. Where we are when we can, with who
Right.
we can. So
Yeah.
I am so thankful for your very, very precious time, your heart, and learning more than I even imagined. And I am excited to
Yeah.
be able to learn from you in our group. I love your one-liners. I love your humor. And again, sometimes yes, I think this last week we were all giggling. We all needed a minute before the next person went on because we were doing our 30-second little,
Right.
education from Dr. Paula. And so you did such good job for Quick Quit. So I've been practicing because mine wasn't. I was like the second one to go, and I was like, a
But
minute.
you know what? But I thought that was a great exercise because now that's all we tend to say we talk too much
Oh,
and we don't have to. If we
no.
just 15, whatever, if we just booms. Because protection when you're with a bunch of people you're familiar with, you don't have to. And even if
Less
people
is more.
you learn what is important because you eliminate all the other stuff.
Yeah. Agreed. I'm so thankful. It is an absolute fire group of humans that are all independently directed
Yeah.
differently with different purposes and passions, yet there's a heart in the room that you can absolutely feel. And
Oh,
I was so excited to sit
it's a
down and get
great
to know
group.
you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Thank
I
you. I'm so
appreciate it.
grateful.
Good luck. I'm sure we'll
Thanks.
see each other. I don't know, Thursday, is it tomorrow? I lose track of days. I
No,
put it in my
couple of days.
calendar.
Couple of days.
Okay.